The sun hung low over the savanna, casting long, stretched shadows across the sea of golden grass. A warm wind stirred the silence, rushing gently against the earth like a whisper from something ancient. In the distance, something small moved, wobbling, limping, barely noticeable at first. But as it drew closer, the truth of what it was unraveled painfully. It was a bear cub, no more than a few months old, its thick fur now caked in soot and dried mud. One of its paws dragged slightly as it walked, leaving behind an uneven trail in the dirt. Its eyes, wide and glossy, darted nervously with each sound, each shift in the grass. And in the air that surrounded it, the smell of smoke still lingered like a ghost. The fire had come quickly. One moment the cub had been nestled beside its mother under the protection of thick jungle trees, and the next, chaos had ripped through the forest like a living monster. Flames roared, branches cracked, animals screamed. Somewhere in that inferno, it had lost her, the one constant in its small world. Now it wandered, not because it knew where to go, but because stillness would mean surrender. Its tiny snout lifted now and then, sniffing the air for a familiar scent, a trace of safety, anything that could tether it back to something known. But the scent of home was gone. Everything was gone. The cub let out a faint sound. Not quite a roar, not quite a cry. It was soft, broken, uncertain. And then it kept walking, each step a fragile defiance against a world that had turned cold and unfamiliar. Trees thinned, the jungle receded, and the horizon opened up into a wide plain of brittle grass and dry wind. Without knowing, the cub had stepped into the hunting ground of lions, a place where silence could mean danger and movement could invite death. But the cub, lost in its grief and fatigue, didn't notice. It was no longer looking ahead. It was looking for something that would never return. And in that unknowing, it crossed a line. Not one marked by borders or signs, but one drawn in the unspoken language of predators. A few yards away, hidden in the swaying grass, amber eyes blinked open. The world had just become smaller, and the cub had no idea how close it stood to becoming a memory. The tall grass rippled like waves, golden and innocent under the midday light, but beneath its beauty lay silence, heavy with intent. Unseen to the wandering cub, 3 sets of eyes tracked its every uncertain step. The lionesses lay low, their tawny bodies almost invisible against the swaying backdrop. They did not speak or growl or stir more than necessary. They simply watched. Hunger had hollowed their bellies for days, and in the unforgiving rhythm of the wild, every opportunity mattered. What they saw now was not a bear, not a fellow predator, not even a challenge. They saw a meal, slow, limping unaware. There was no malice in their gaze, no hatred, only the cold, calculating quiet of survival. One moved slightly to the left, the other to the right. The third remained still, eyes locked on the cub's spine. They were in perfect sync, shaped by years of hunting together, bonded by necessity more than affection. The dry earth absorbed the sound of their paws. Even the wind, it seemed, knew better than to rustle too loudly. It was a choreography of death, beautiful in its precision and horrifying in its purpose. The cub paused. Something in its small frame stiffened. The world around it hadn't changed, but something deeper, instinctual, began to stir. It sniffed the air, but caught only the scent of dust and sun-baked grass. Still it hesitated. Its breath grew shallow. Tiny ears twitched. The kind of silence surrounding it now was different, heavier, pressed down by invisible weight. Its mother would have known what it meant. She would have growled, shielded, fought. But the cub had no such guidance now. Just the distant echo of a warmth it could no longer feel. The lionesses stopped moving. The trap was almost set. One more step, one more moment of trust in the open plain, and the space between predator and prey would collapse. Time held its breath. The grasses stilled. Even the birds seemed to vanish into the sky. The cub stood there, alone and trembling, on the edge of something final. It had wandered into the heart of instinct itself, and for a breathless moment, the entire savanna leaned in, waiting to see if mercy had any place left in the wild. The moment broke like glass. One of the lionesses shifted from stillness into motion, her muscles uncoiling with terrifying grace. In a blur of dust and muscle, she lunged forward, low and fast, her eyes fixed on the helpless cub. The grass parted as if cut by the wind, and her body moved like a shadow with weight, silent, efficient, lethal. Every fiber of her being was tuned to the pursuit, every second narrowing the distance between hunger and its answer. The cub didn't move. It didn't even flinch, whether from exhaustion or some quiet understanding that its small legs could never outrun the force bearing down on it. The cub remained where it stood, its head dipped slightly, not in surrender, but in something quieter, resignation. The world had taken so much from it already. Maybe this was just the last of it. As the lioness leapt, claws stretching forward, time collapsed into a heartbeat. Then it happened. From the depths of the jungle behind them, a sound erupted, low, ancient, and shattering. It wasn't a roar. It was something older, something that didn't beg for attention but demanded it. A thunderous cry, echoing off the trees and rolling across the savanna like a wave of earth itself. It wasn't just heard, it was felt. In the ribs, in the soil, in the bones. Mid-air, the lioness halted, her body twisted sharply, instincts overriding hunger. She landed short of the cub, claws digging into the dirt, tail flicking sharply in confusion. The other two froze as well, eyes widening, head snapping toward the jungle. Then came the tremor, subtle at first, just a ripple under the grass. Then stronger. The ground beneath their paws began to shudder with rhythm, as if something immense was walking not on the land, but through it. The lionesses, seasoned hunters, had faced buffalo, warthogs, even rival males. But this was different. This was something they did not challenge, something they recognized not as prey or predator, but as force. The cub looked up, blinking slowly, its tiny body still motionless. The threat hadn't vanished, but the air had shifted, and in that charged silence, as dust floated in the trembling sunlight, the wild itself seemed to hold its breath, because something massive was coming, and everything knew it. From the wall of trees, the undergrowth parted with a sound unlike anything the plains were used to. Not the soft rustle of deer or the swift rustling of monkeys, but a deep, cracking sway, branches moving aside for something too large to weave between them. A shadow stretched out from the forest's edge, long and deliberate, until finally the jungle gave way and the giants stepped into the open. First came the matriarch. Her skin, wrinkled and gray like weathered stone, glistened in patches where sunlight kissed her massive form. Her ears flared wide, catching the wind like sails, and her trunk curled with silent purpose. Without a moment's hesitation, she let out another trumpet, louder, longer, more forceful than the first. It wasn't rage. It was command. It was warning. Behind her followed a younger bull, larger in build, but with the hesitance of one still learning when to lead and when to follow. Together, they stepped forward, their feet sending subtle shudders through the earth with each ponderous stride. The lionesses, now exposed, instinctively stepped back, their sleek forms suddenly looking fragile beneath the looming presence of the elephants. Their eyes darted, tails twitching, not in retreat, but in uncertainty. They didn't flee, not yet. They held their ground, bound by the thin line between desperation and wisdom. But tension laced the air like electricity before a storm. The matriarch paused only once, scanning the small creature that sat motionless in the grass. The cub, so small and dust-covered it barely looked alive, blinked up at her. There was no recognition in its eyes, no knowledge of what an elephant was or why it had come. But there was no fear either. The bear cub didn't flinch as the massive creature stepped between it and the lionesses. It simply looked up, eyes wide, caught between trauma and wonder. The matriarch shifted again, moving her thick body with surprising grace, placing herself directly in front of the cub. The younger bull followed her lead, mirroring the barrier she formed. Their stance was not aggressive. It was protective, the kind of protection that rose not from obligation, but from something ancient and instinctive, a grief remembered, a life defended. In that stillness, the savanna seemed divided. On one side, hunger stalked. On the other, guardian stood tall. And between them, in the smallest patch of trembling grass, a cub sat quietly, unaware that the course of its life had just been rewritten by giants. The world held its breath. The tall grass stood still. The trees whispered no wind, and the sky, once golden with sunlight, now felt heavy, as if bearing witness to a sacred standoff. Only the sound of breath filled the space. Deep, deliberate exhales from the elephants, quicker, sharper ones from the lionesses. No animal moved without purpose. The cub remained between the legs of the matriarch, still seated, its small chest rising and falling as it tried to make sense of the world that suddenly refused to let it die. The lionesses, though momentarily still, were not finished. Hunger had brought them here. Hunger did not leave so easily. One of them, the leanest and most desperate, began to shift. Step by step, she moved, body low to the ground, muscles coiled with caution rather than fury. She wasn't charging. She was testing the patience of giants, testing the weight of her own instincts against the will of something older, stronger. The younger bull saw her first. His ears snapped back, and his head lowered in warning. When she crept a few steps further, he stomped the ground, sending up a small cloud of dust. It was not enough. He swung his trunk in a wide, powerful arc, letting it slap the air with a force that echoed across the field like a snapped tree branch. That was enough. The lioness stopped. Her muscles tensed, but she didn't move forward again. A stillness fell again, more intense than before. It wasn't just a pause. It was a negotiation in silence. A conversation carried through body language, memory, and instinct. The matriarch stood firm, unmoved, her massive shadow cast over the cub. Her eyes never left the lionesses. She had done this before. She had buried calves, lost siblings, defended her own with this same stance. She would not bend now, not even for queens of the Savanna. The lionesses watched, and slowly, the moment passed. One by one, they turned, not in defeat, but in understanding. There would be no easy meal today. The grass swallowed them as they walked away, tails low, eyes still fixed on the scene behind them. They didn't vanish. Not entirely. They lingered at the edges, silent witnesses to something outside the laws of tooth and claw. And in that fading light, beneath the silent guardianship of the jungle's mightiest, a tiny bear remained untouched, not by power, but by something rarer still. Mercy. The lionesses had disappeared into the brush, but the elephants did not leave. They remained still, their massive forms casting long shadows over the cub as the sun began its slow descent. The younger bull shifted his weight, but stayed close, his presence steady yet deferential. The matriarch stood unmoving, watching the grass where danger had once crouched, as if making certain it would not return. Only when the air around them felt truly quiet again did she lower her great head. Her trunk reached out with impossible gentleness, curling toward the cub in slow, deliberate movements. The tip brushed against the bear's fur, lifting a patch of dirt, then paused over its small head. The cub didn't flinch. Its eyes were tired, but calm now, looking up into the face of something it didn't understand. This wasn't its mother. This wasn't a bear. But somehow, in the presence of this towering protector, the cub didn't feel alone. Somewhere deep in the matriarch's mind, memory stirred, not with words, but with feeling. A time when the cries of her own calf echoed through the trees. A night when moonlight was broken by movement in the dark, and predators struck while the herd had scattered. She had fought. She had bled. But she had not saved him. The forest had taken what she had carried for nearly 2 years inside her, and she had never fully stopped listening for his voice. Now, standing over a creature not her own, shaped by different instincts, fur-covered and clawed, something ancient moved through her again. A maternal current that didn't ask for species or kinship, only need. She lowered her trunk again, this time wrapping it softly around the cub's side, as if checking for injury, as if trying to understand what kind of fragile thing had found its way into her care. Then she nudged it gently. The cub blinked and stood, still limping but steadier now. The matriarch turned, walking slowly, and the cub followed. Step by step, they moved away from the open savanna, back toward the trees, where the shadows stretched long and cool. The younger bull took up position behind them, not out of command, but solidarity. It was not their calf. It was not their kind, but it was lost, and it had been spared. And in that quiet, profound decision to walk with it, something beautiful happened. Not rescue, not dominance, just guardianship, born from loss. The jungle welcomed them with hush and wonder. Between tangled roots and tall trees, the elephants moved slowly, their steps deliberate and quiet, as if understanding the sacredness of the moment they carried with them. Between them, the bear cub walked, not as a passenger, not carried, but on its own legs. They wobbled at first, uncertain, still sore from fear and fatigue. But the longer it followed, the steadier it moved, as though each step beside the matriarch drew a quiet strength from the earth beneath its feet. The path they chose was narrow, tucked beneath layers of green that filtered the sunlight into soft apples. It was a trail not often traveled, a place known only to the wild and those who listened. Along the way, other eyes blinked open. A pair of antelope froze beneath a fig tree. A group of baboons quieted their usual mischief and stared in stunned silence. Even a jaguar, resting high in the branches, tilted its head in confusion. None of them made a sound. They simply watched this strange procession. A bear cub walking in the shadow of elephants, wrapped in an unspoken peace that defied the rules they had all lived by. The cub no longer flinched at sounds or paused at rustling leaves. It stayed close to the matriarch, never falling behind, never wandering off. It was not just following now, it was trusting. Eventually, the jungle opened up into a hidden clearing few humans had ever seen. A watering hole sat in its center, its waters cool and still, reflecting the sky above like a quiet secret. The matriarch stepped aside, letting the cub approach first. It sniffed the air, then dipped its head to drink, the water washing away more than just thirst. High above them, unseen, a quiet hum passed overhead. A wildlife ranger's drone, dispatched days earlier to track herd movements after the forest fires, happened to glide above at just the right moment. Its camera lens tilted, its signal beamed back to a small monitor miles away. The ranger watching it paused in disbelief. There, in the center of the screen, a bear cub drank between two elephants. No fear, no chase, just the calm of belonging where it had no reason to belong. The footage made its way from the ranger's console to a global audience in less than a day. At first, it was met with disbelief, grainy frames of a lone bear cub walking beside two elephants, followed by clearer, stabilized shots that revealed the full weight of the moment. Wildlife experts, conservationists, and everyday people watched in silence as nature unfolded in a way they rarely expected. There were no growls, no rush of survival, only stillness, only mercy. Television panels filled with experts debated whether this was true empathy or just an anomaly of circumstance. Could a creature like an elephant, bound to its own herd and kind, truly understand the suffering of another species? Was it grief reborn, memory translated into action, or had instinct momentarily given way to something softer, something deeper? Across all the noise, one truth remained untouched. Something extraordinary had taken place, and it could not be explained away by formulas or fear. What lingered most was not the debate, but the image itself. A bear cub, drinking slowly beside an elephant whose trunk hovered nearby, as if guarding a flame from the wind. There was no tension, no threat, only the serenity of a moment that defied what was expected of the wild. And then, as the sun dipped below the canopy and shadows stretched long across the clearing, the cub curled its small body against the matriarch's towering leg. She didn't move. She didn't shift. She stood as still as the trees around her, a silent sentinel for the life she had chosen to protect. The final narration comes not as a statement, but as a quiet truth. In the wild, survival is rarely fair. But now and then, mercy roars louder than instinct. And when it does, even the fiercest hearts can choose to protect the smallest life. As darkness falls, the screen fades, not into blackness, but into the gentle rustle of leaves and the rhythm of quiet breath. The world sleeps, and somewhere deep within the jungle, a cub rests safely beneath the shadow of a heart large enough to hold grief and grace in equal measure. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful moments from the wild, where even the untamed sometimes choose compassion over conquest. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many more untold moments lie hidden in the wild. We bring these powerful, emotional tales to life, stories of courage, compassion, and the unexpected bonds that shape nature. Don't miss the next journey. Subscribe to our channel and be part of a world where every heartbeat matters.